Firstly, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to acknowledge the other former patrol officers that are on this ship. These guys did the hard yards. I'm the Johnny-come-lately that came up behind and cleaned up their mess, basically. Sorry, Jack. Just a little bit of levity. Well, welcome, good morning. My name is John Hocknell. I'm a former patrol officer in Papua New Guinea, and my wife Morag there, she'll be making a presentation tomorrow on the life of a patrol officer. We got married in the UK and moved out to Melbourne, and within 12 months found out that the job or the promotional prospects, I'm an aircraft engineer, the promotional prospects in working for ANZET were pretty limited, and there was a little advert in the evening newspaper in Melbourne that read something like, "Do you want to lead a man's life, be an assistant patrol officer in Papua New Guinea?" I thought, oh, that sounds all right. So we sent off a telegram to the address, and telegrams went back and forth. This was in 1970, and eventually a contract turned up, and I signed it, sent it off to Canberra, and then I said to Maureen, I said, "Hey, we've got the contract, let's find out where this Papua New Guinea place is." So we had no idea where we were going, and I went off to Sydney for 3 months and did 3 months training in Sydney in law, pidgin English, anthropology, geography, surveying, you know, we did it. And then went up to Port Moresby for a month, did some training in local government, and then we were sent off to our various stations. Just to give you an idea, Papua New Guinea is probably twice the size, or over twice the size of Victoria. New Guinea Island is the second largest island in the world, and it's split in half, Papua on one side and Papua New Guinea on the other side. So just to ease you into the presentation, some of you may or may not remember this TV program, the ABC.
Hello and welcome to a very special Can We Help? This, my friends, is our 100th episode, and we have something a little different for you. We've broken free of the studio to where magic occurs. And we're going to see what happens next with two of our most remarkable lost and found stories. Come on! Jonas Ramon shared with us a very emotional journey, and his reunion with his mum was unforgettable. Later on, we'll find out just how that relationship has blossomed. John Hocknell asked for our help to find some old friends in Papua New Guinea who had a massive impact on his life. When he came back home, he was so touched, he decided he had to do something. We'll have that story for you in a while.
Yeah, we met John Hocknell last year. He asked us if we could help him make his dream come true. Let's see what happened. These images, filmed more than 30 years ago, are of the Huli people in Tari, a small village in the southern highlands of Papua New Guinea. A place John and Morag Hocknell called home for 4 years.
It was definitely a culture shock, but we were there to live a life experience that really cannot be replaced.
The year was 1973, and John had just taken up an Australian government offer to become a local administrator, otherwise known as a Kiap. On paper, a Kiap's role was to help govern the fragmented and often warring groups of villages and help pave the way for a transition towards independence. In reality, the Kiaps had a hand in everything, from running the bank and post office to the justice system.
I was a commissioned police officer that actually told the policemen to go off and investigate and arrest people, and then I was actually the officer in charge of the calaboose, the little lockup that we had, so I actually had to look after the prisoners that I'd convicted, and that's the type of work we did.
John and Morag haven't been back to Tari since they left in 1977 and asked for our help to find out how the village has fared, in particular what became of 3 very close friends, Stephen, Jacinta and Hogogo, the second in charge of the village.
Hogogo was a real character. He was a bit of a political mover and shaker in the area, and a very, very astute guy, learnt Pidgin English very, very quickly. I only hope the Hogogo is still alive, because I'd really like to go and shake his hand, because he was a real character.
When we began our search, the hope was all three were alive. The difficulty was in communicating with an area so remote. The breakthrough came when a local gas and oil company identified Stephen, and we were able to arrange for John and Morag's return flight to Tari.
I've got absolutely no idea how we as a family are remembered by the old people. No idea at all. John, yeah.
It's simple, man. Stephen Lialu.
Hi, Stephen. Well done. How old is he?
Stephen, Hogogo and Jacinta are all there to greet them.
Oh, this is brilliant. I'm overwhelmed with the reception.
Despite the joy of the reunion, John soon learns the reality of life in Tari today. Unfortunately, very few of the roads, bridges, small hospitals or schools they set up still operate.
When
we had set up that provincial government and then all this, we thought that they would give us money to maintain the plantations and roads and bridges, all this, but now money goes to the pocket long now. Service long, people know that, so and most of that, that's why all something broke down.
Yes. You got a bag, you got These are some top people, but it doesn't sound as though the government really takes much notice of them, unfortunately. Yes, it's a pity. I'm happy I came. I'm glad the people here have got good memories of us. That's an important thing, and I only wish a lot more could be done.
When John returned to Australia, his desire to help the community only intensified. In particular, he felt the need to provide for the schools that had suffered from a decade of social unrest and governmental neglect.
I was told that the libraries in the schools had either been destroyed, or because they closed a lot of the schools down, the books just deteriorated through lack of use and care and maintenance, and they just didn't have any library resources.
Using his skills as a professional fundraiser, John was determined to make a difference.
I made a few calls to a few of my colleagues and said, look, do you happen to have old uniforms? Are you replenishing your library? Do you have any school resources that you don't want? And just from those few phone calls, they said, yes, we've got this material. You see some letters down from the school.
What John modestly describes as materials was in fact $50,000 worth of donated goods, including 2.5 tons of books, 20 computers, tables, chairs and school uniforms. To get it all to PNG, John called in a very old favour.
When I was in Papua New Guinea working there, I was on the coast, and I actually rescued one of the shipping company's small coastal traders from being broken up on the reef. And I had a letter from the company saying, thanks very much, and if there's anything I can do, let us know. I mean, this letter was 32, 33 years old. So I dragged the letter out and I rang them up and I said, hey, look, what do you reckon? And they said, wow, this is amazing. Yes, we'll help you. So they shipped the container at no cost.
The resources were distributed between 21 schools in the area, and the local pathology centre was provided with its only computer. John wasn't there for the delivery, but the letters of thanks and photos he's received show how much the gifts were appreciated.
the benefits of receiving the books in particular for the youngsters is going to be immeasurable, because it's a resource that they didn't have. B, they're desperate to learn English. These resources have increased the number of opportunities available to these kids.
You know, when we first met John Hocknell last year, it was really clear to me that 3 hours in that community was not going to be enough, that he was frustrated and wanted to do something.
Some people just make you feel like you don't do enough sometimes, don't they?
Yeah, his commitment's fantastic, and it's not about charity.
Not just a matter of charity.
Yeah, I think the concern is if it's charity, then the community doesn't develop. So he's trying to establish some real business and educational links between the community and Brisbane. So good luck to John. It's a great thing he's doing.
Thank you, Jeff. Well done. Over the years of
Well, there we are, ladies and gentlemen. The word Kiap is a derivation of the German captain, and this comes from when the Germans looked after German New Guinea, the north part of Papua New Guinea. And patrol officers became known as Kiaps. The Australian government looked after Papua New Guinea from 1910 through 1973, and in that time there were less than 2,000 patrol officers in that entire period of time. So it just goes to show you that we're in a pretty unique group. When we got the contract through, this was the duty statement that came through with it. Just to give you an idea, don't read it all, we'll go through it slowly. But when we arrived in Papua New Guinea, the first place we were sent to was Bulgaria. But just to give people that know nothing about Papua New Guinea or where we're going to Alito is down here, so our first port of call, and then up to Madang. So our first station was in Bulgaria, second one Sidor, and then into the Southern Highlands, or what's now known as the Hela province, into Tari and Como. The work that we did is on the left. Maureen got herself involved in various activities, and she'll give you a lot more information about what she did tomorrow. And I was involved in patrolling, and that's me paying the carriers after we'd arrived back on the station. That outfit that I'm wearing isn't a uniform. My uncle was in the RAF in Singapore, and when I knew I was going to the tropics, I asked him to organise for his tailor to send me through 3 sets of RAF tropical gear, so because they make the best cotton gear for wearing in the tropics, so I ended up looking like a soldier, I suppose. But on patrol we would have anywhere between 20 and 50 carriers, and this is the typical crossing of a bridge. We were on patrol for anywhere between 15 days a month was fairly regular, and up to 60 days is the longest patrol I ever went on. But the type of terrain that we went through, we were in the jungle, as you can see. I mean, you see movies about people slashing their way through the jungle and all that. That's not how it is. Well, it is in some areas, but generally you've got a very high canopy and there's very little vegetation on the ground floor. It's very dark down there, so consequently you can't see a great deal, but occasionally you get the nice view of a waterfall and the like. But on the coast we did river patrols, so we'd move around in canoes or work boats and bump into these idyllic little villages set on the side of in this case it's the tributary of the Ramu River. One thing we had to be very careful about when we were on patrol was to make sure that we didn't create problems, in that when we had carriers from one village moving to another area, we would go up to the boundary of those 2 villages, stop and wait for the villagers to come from the second village to take our gear up to their village. So we spread the money around and we didn't take any animosity from one village into the next. So a little bit diplomatic way of spreading the money around and keeping the peace. But I'll just give you an idea. The first three things that we did, we were involved in patrolling, taking census. As I said before, there's some people here that were involved in opening up uncontrolled areas, and you've got to dip your lip to these guys because they were going into the absolute unknown. I said on the video I was a policeman, I was a magistrate, and I was a jailer as well. But generally, on patrol, this is the sort of thing that we come across, a temporary bridge. Obviously, if there's a little bit of rain further up in the hills, that bridge would only last a few minutes. The guy crossing the river, that's the most attractive bucket I've ever seen, a stainless steel bucket. I don't know idea where it came from, but occasionally I'd take it in when we get to the village, I'd give it to the kids, and I'd say, go and get some freshwater crayfish, and they'd come back with a half-full bucket of freshwater crayfish, and that was a nice tea that night. But on this particular patrol, we were going up into the hills behind Sidor, and we came across half a dozen World War II mortar positions, and there were heavy and light mortars, but there were stacks of mortars, maybe a metre and a half deep. So as soon as we saw that, we ran the other direction very quickly, and then called the army and the bomb disposal unit to come in and get rid of all the mortars that were there. Some were Japanese and some were American. But this is a typical patrol coming home. As you can see, the patrol boxes that we had were galvanised iron boxes, and in there we had the kerosene stove, kerosene lamps, the bedding, all the food, Tom Piper's vegetable and sausage, oxen palm, corned beef, rice, tin fish for the dog, and other odds and ends we'd carry in that patrol boxes. But when we got into the villages, we had to look after the carriers and the policemen that were with us, and we'd get the villagers to bring their spare vegetables out, and we'd pay for them, generally with cash. But in this particular instance, we were right down in the Great Papuan Plateau, an area that, according to the records that I saw, was first came under control in 1963, and I was there in 1973. And we were still using salt to pay for the vegetables. But the type of terrain that we went through meant that we would cross this sort of bridge. It's a cane bridge. It's just all made from natural materials, vines that grow everywhere, and they string them together and eventually create a bridge. As you can see, that river's pretty benign, but when it was flowing really high, the bridge was open weave there, so a lot of the debris got washed straight through, and the bridge kept its strength and structure. This will just give you an idea of patrol going through in that particular area. These, the video and the still shots that you see are all 40-odd years old. It's a Super 8 soundless movie, and the others were 35mm slides. So any problems with the reproduction, that's why it's that old. But as you can see from here, the track came down across, and the river is not flowing all that strongly, so the carriers thought it was a lot quicker and easier just to actually cross the river rather than go across the bridge. But there's the bridge in there. And so we'd spend our time going through, and this particular bridge was probably the biggest in the area, and a lot of the carriers didn't want to go through the water, obviously, but they were also scared about going over on the bridge, except for coming up the other side of the river. But the council clerk that was with me at the time, he decided that he would give the people that were crossing the bridge a bit of a scare. So the guy immediately behind him, this is where we'd come down here, and the actual track was way up at the top of the hill was where we started from, back in there to walk down to the river. But the council clerk was on the crossing the bridge, and this guy here was particularly scared about going over the bridge, and this is the council clerk here. So he decided that when he got to the end of the bridge, he'd give all these people coming across a bit of a scare. So he decided that he would there you go, bounce up and down on the end of the bridge, just to give everybody a bit of a hurry up. But the type of thing that the houses that we saw, I'll cover this in a lot more detail in another presentation, but that house there were well over 30 families living in that house. But that's the sort of thing that we saw down in the Basavi area. One of the other aspects that we had to cover, obviously, was to keep the village, the people that we had given authority to, and they were called Luluais and Tultuls in Papua, and they were handed a uniform with a red lap, a blue lap, blue jumper, red cummerbund and a belt and a badge, and they were the village officials. So when we actually got to the village, this particular instance, we called them all together because we had to tell them about some government 8-point plan or something like that. And we bring them all together to talk to them, give them the message from the government, and I was handing out twist tobacco, which is regular tobacco leaves soaked in molasses and then really tightly twisted together. And they'd come out maybe 12 inches long, and we'd hand these out as a little bit of a gift to these village officials, and they'd take them away and they unplant them and dry the molasses and then smoke the tobacco, doing a bit for their health. 3 more things that involved in was land duties. These were land disputes. There was always disputes in land, but also we had to survey land for purchase for schools, aid posts and the like, and sometimes we built like a coffee plantation, for example. We had to find out who the traditional owners of the land were. But up in Papua New Guinea, it's not a simple matter of just drawing a picture on a map and getting a chain and compass out and saying, okay, who owns this land? We could find out who owned the land, but then we had to find out who owned the trees, who owned the gardens, who owned whatever. So we just went all the way down the track, making sure that we compensated everybody that was involved. And big projects like this, we had to survey and pay for the land, excuse me, for airstrips. And this is another job that we did, was building roads, building bridges, building airstrips. And in this particular instance, this is in the back of Sidor. These people were desperately wanted an airstrip into their area, so various patrols went up at different times and helped with the construction of the airstrip. But if you can see back here, these 2 little orange things, 2 wheelbarrows and 30 shovels built that airstrip. My job when I went up there, it was pouring with rain. This whole area here was just a huge puddle, and my job was to get the water off the airstrip. So we dug this trench here, and then we built these herringbone trenches across, and the guys did the hard work with the shovels, and the ladies went down to the creek, probably about 700 or 800 feet down, collected the river stones and brought them up and filled up the trenches so that we could wash the water away. Right next to the airstrip was the rest house that they built for the construction of the strip. And this is just an image from inside the house looking out. And you can see there's a village down here. The thing that was amazing about this place was that during my stay there, as I said, it had been raining, but if you've ever been right inside the middle of a thunderstorm, that's the place to do it. It was just horrendous. The lightning and and thunder was there, instant. And you know, I spent probably half an hour with my hands firmly over my ears because the sound was atrocious. But in that little village there was a family, and they because it was up in the mountains behind Sidor, the family would send their children down to the coast for an education. And the kids from the village were down on the coast, and what usually happens is the kids get malaria. And in this particular instance, this young lad, he and his cousin were down there, and they were playing soccer, just a bit of rough and tumble soccer, and he heavily tackled his cousin. This lad about 12, 13 years of age. Heavy tackle on his cousin, and his cousin fell down, and 10 minutes later he's dead. And I had to go out to the school and pick up the body and bring it back to Sidor and bring him back with me because nobody knew how this child had died. So eventually we had a post-mortem, and it turned out that his cousin, who was a lot smaller than him, had a spleen that was 1.5 times the size of an adult. And the heavy tackle had ruptured the spleen, and the child had died from the ruptured spleen. Sounds okay to us that that type of thing can happen, but up in Papua New Guinea, it was a case of he killed that boy, and we didn't see how it was done. So magic must have happened. So we had to protect this young lad until, we charged him first with murder. I looked after him in a little shed in our back garden, and then we took him up to Madang for a Supreme Court case, and he was found not guilty by virtue of the fact that it was purely accidental and there was no malice there. But to convince the families that he wasn't a Sanguma man or a witch doctor or whatever, at that airstrip I was up there talking to both the families, and it turned out that the family of the deceased, that was their only son, their only child. And this is Maboyo, his parents gave Maboyo to that family as their new son to look after them. So basically it was continuing on and providing support to those parents, and everybody was perfectly happy with that arrangement. That young lad, I paid for him to go to a training college in Kaka to learn to be a plumber, not a regular plumber, but his main job would have been to repair water tanks. It was the main thing, was to construct water tanks. But this is another area right up in the Finisterre Ranges. This particular place is 9,000 feet. This is Tep Tep. If anybody goes on Google and videos or YouTube or whatever and looks up Tep Tep, you'll find that this is one of the steepest airstrips in Papua New Guinea. And this is patrol. This is a 60-day patrol we were on. We're just arriving, and we had a whole range of things to do on this patrol, which included Self-Government Day celebrations, and Japanese War Graves Commission, and a whole range of things that we did on this particular patrol. But I'll just give you an idea of the terrain that we had to patrol through. And when we left here, anyway, one of the other jobs that we had to do was local government advisors. And when I first arrived in the Madang province, we were in a place called Bogia, and I was made the local government advisor to Yabu Local Government Council, which is Manam Island, and Almami Local Government Council on the mainland. But this, to give you an idea, this is Manam Island back in 1971. As you can see, it's an active volcano. That cloud line there is at about 1,000 feet, at 6,000 feet. At the time, there were only maybe 6,000 people who lived on the island. But in '94, the island blew its top. They evacuated everybody onto the mainland and bought a couple of coconut plantations to provide land and food gardens for the people of Manam. And now, I think there's 30,000 Manam Islanders living on the mainland, causing a great deal of consternation to the local landowners, who have a totally different culture to the Manam Island, absolutely totally different. But this is the sort of landing that we went on, a little government work boat across onto a tiny beach. There's volcanic sand, as you can see. The kids had come down to the boat to see us in. And all of you cruisers, group 1 to the tender, please. This is our tender. The guy in the front with the oar obviously is the boat's crew, and the two guys at the back were a couple of officials. The guy with the sunglasses was a school inspector. He was going off to check that the teachers were doing the right thing. When it came to my turn to get on that dinghy, I decided I was going to be clever. I was going to actually do a patrol around the island in one day. Never done before, but I was going to do that by taking a motorbike with me. So I put a little Honda 90 onto the dinghy. I'm standing holding onto the Honda 90. The boat's crew's paddling gently. We got in front of the workboat, and this wave hit the side of the dinghy, made it rock. And of course, what happened? I fell backwards. The bike fell on my knees. The back of my knees was over the gunwales of the dinghy, head and shoulders into the water, taking in gulps of seawater and fuel out of the tank of the Honda 90. The boat's crew very, very quickly, thank God, lifted the bike off my legs, and I was spluttering and gasping, got back into the dinghy, paddled to the shore, got the bike off, eventually got it started, and then I took off on my motorbike patrol, which I thought was very innovative. It's the last time I did it. On the other side of the island, it was quite interesting. I came across this particular site. We've got the guy at the back there, was a local, he was an islander, he was a fishingman, and the way he fished was he had a hand line, and on the end of the hand line he got a number 7 hook. Any fisherman know what number 7 hook's like? Well, he got a number 7 hook, but he got 4 of them, and he bound them very, very tightly together to make like a grappling iron. Attached that to the end of the hand line, and then he just paddled his canoe over the top of the rocks and the reef there, just dragging this behind him to see what he could jag. And what he did, he caught this groper behind the gill and just opened the gill of the groper. Well, the groper was going to drown, so he came up to the surface, and he very hurriedly and gently pulled this groper towards his canoe, and then got a big lump of wood and knocked the groper on the head, and then paddled inshore. The culture of these people on the island is a paramount chief, and each village has its chief, a bit like 12th century England with the king and the lords of the manor and everything. So everything belonged to the chief, not to him. He got given some of it. So his job was to take this fish, which weighed about 120 kilos, from the shore up to the village. The guy on the left is a little sea-pick bloke, a little short guy. And you can imagine it's a volcano. The beach is shaped like this. So the guy at the back decided, I've got to take the fish into the village. So he went to the front. And he started walking up the hill. And as he walked up the hill, this fish slid down the pole, and the little guy's head went inside the mouth of the fish. It was one of the funniest sights I've ever seen up there. But other things that we did here were, adult education. We were looking at economic development, building, as I said before, coffee plantations and chili plantations in the Southern Highlands, or the Hela province I was in. I encouraged a few guys to set up crocodile farms. I mean, we're talking about nearly 400 miles inland, and there was 12, 13-foot crocodiles in the river. It's amazing. But this is a typical village site on the coast. All the houses are well in order. Families that live there, you've got one family living per house, like husband, wife, kids, maybe even an older mother with grandparents were living in the house. But further up into the hills, the houses were discreetly placed inside valleys. And you see, this was impenetrable jungle around here as defence. But I'm standing on a walking track looking down into this particular village. Other places that we went to, this is up in the Finisterre Ranges. Now, I'm obviously not flying, I'm walking on a track, looking down into this village here. Now, way up in these places, this large building here was the church. What did the church have? Corrugated iron roof. And they carted corrugated iron for days just to give the church a corrugated iron roof. Having carried out the census and various work in this village, the next task was to go to this village. And there's a church up there. Now, we could stand here and shout to the people up there, saying, put the kettle on, we'll be there in about 6.5 hours' time. Because it took 2 hours to go from this village down the ravine, down to the very, very bottom of the ravine, and then up the other side until we eventually made it up to there. And that was just a typical 1 day's walk. The other things that we brought, we're bringing democracy to Papua New Guinea. How many Queenslanders? Yeah. That debacle that went on there is not unheard of there either. But we occasionally would go on patrol for elections. Here we've got ballot boxes. And in this particular image here, we've got the ballot box. There's democracy in action. There's me handing out the ballot paper. Now, the ballot paper could have 20 photographs and names on it. And it was preferential voting, so that each box had to be numbered. And this guy here is interpreter, and we would have to mark each box 1 to 20. 99.9% people were illiterate, so they just had to put their finger on what they wanted. Now, there was either a photograph or an image, a sign that represented the different candidates. Inevitably, when you put a 20-long ballot box in ballot paper in the polling booth there, the person would just go bump, 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 bump up the page, or bump, 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 bump down the page. So the donkey vote usually ended up winning. This is a typical transport. This on the river. So you know, these huge logs that had a 250 horsepower on the outboard engine on the end. They really moved along. It's amazing travelling on that. That's the Rama River that we were on there. One of the other patrols we were on and down is in the Basavi, and this will give you an idea of patrolling through that area. Really, really beautiful place. I had a dog with me, and he was a bit of a pig dog, and he used to chase around and round up the villagers' pigs in the village, and occasionally kill a piglet, and it cost me $5 to pay for the piglet. But he always used to run in front of the patrol. And up in Papua New Guinea, when they're cutting down trees, they don't cut them down at the base. You know, they cut them at chest height, so about maybe 4 foot, 3.5, 4 foot off the ground. There's all these tree stumps. And he went off down the track, and the next thing we hear all this squealing, and he'd unearthed a wild pig. And he's chasing this pig back down the track towards us. And the policemen, when they're going into the village, in the village or leaving the village, they always put the boots on, make them look official. It's great. As soon as they leave the village, they take the boots off. It's a lot easier to walk without boots. Obviously, the carriers don't have any boots on. This pig came tearing towards us, and what do the carriers and the policemen do? Straight up the nearest tree. What am I trying to do? Climb up onto a 4 foot high stump with boots on. My boots are slipping and sliding everywhere. The pig saw me. The dog's chasing the pig. I ran round the other side of the tree. The pig followed me. The dog followed the pig. And we three of us were going round and round and round this tree stump. Eventually I whistled on the dog, and the dog stood still, and I ran past the dog. The pig ran into the dog. The dog caught the pig on the back of the neck, held him really tight, and I said, okay, I'm off. So I took off down the track as fast as I could go, and it was like confetti, the carriers and the policemen just dropping out of trees, grabbing all the gear and running like hell down behind me. Eventually got down maybe 100 metres down the track, gave the dog a whistle, and he just snapped the back of this pig's neck. and trotted off down the road feeling very pleased with himself. 2 days later we're back at this village, and there it was, the pig was there. The villagers had found the pig, they'd taken it back to the village, they'd prepared it, and all the carriers and the policemen had a great old time having this wild pig. Fortunately, that pig didn't cost me anything because it was wild. But the type of thing that we had to do was to fill out a daily report, and there we got date, folio number, what we did. In this particular instance, I set up a rifle range, was doing a bit of rifle practice for the people at Bulgaria. But that's the sort of thing we have to do every day. But there we are, ladies and gentlemen, they're the duties that we had to do. Like in any public service, we also had that. So that just covered everything. And if you go back to the Can We Help program, this is the sort of thing that we were able to do for the kids. There was a young lady that we met earlier, was at Somerville House in Brisbane. I don't know whether she's here this morning, but that's the summer school uniform of Somerville House in Brisbane. The girls really enjoyed that. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, other than the interruption, that's it. Thanks very much indeed for coming along. Tomorrow at 10, I think it is, my wife Morag will be doing a presentation on the life of the wife of a patrol officer, and we'll be doing a couple more presentations about culture and artefacts and a few other bits and pieces later on. So I hope to see you then. Thanks very much indeed.